I always thought I had the perfect relationship with my boyfriend, Sam. We had been together for 4 years. And from the outside looking in, we were that couple everyone envied. Deeply in love, supportive, and excitedly planning our future together. We talked about marriage, kids, and all the wonderful things that come with a lifelong partnership. I was convinced Sam was the one. But everything started to change about 6 months ago when he lost his job unexpectedly. It felt like a punch to the gut. Not just for him but for both of us. At first, I tried to support him as best as I could. I encouraged him to stay positive, to search for new opportunities, and to talk to someone, a therapist or counselor, about what he was going through. Sam was always the kind of guy who took pride in being strong, both emotionally and physically, and I figured he just needed time to find his footing again. As the weeks turned into months, his mood darkened, and I watched helplessly as he spiraled deeper into despair. Sam became increasingly withdrawn, moody, and stopped taking care of himself. The charming, vibrant man I fell in love with was slipping away right before my eyes. I tried to be patient, believing that once he found a new job, everything would go back to normal. But normal felt like a distant memory. He stopped showering regularly and barely left our apartment. The sight of him sitting on the couch in the same sweatpants for days on end was heartbreaking. At first, I attributed it to the stress of job hunting. But as the days passed, I noticed a change in him that went beyond just sadness. He became obsessive about his phone, spending hours locked away in the bathroom or turning the screen away whenever I approached. It felt like there was a wall between us, one that he had erected brick by brick. I tried to give him space, respecting his need to cope in his own way. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I had a gut feeling that the phone was a gateway to something he wasn't ready to share with me. One evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find him passed out on the couch, surrounded by empty beer cans. The apartment was a disaster, dirty dishes piled up, the smell of stale food in the air, and Sam hadn't eaten or moved for hours. In that moment, something snapped inside me. I could no longer ignore the secrecy in the distance. I picked up his phone, which had fallen between the couch cushions, and unlocked it. What I discovered shattered me. Sam had been living a double life. Not only was he constantly talking to other women, but he was also deeply involved in disturbing online communities focused on violent and explicit sexual content. The graphic conversations I found included violent fantasies and degrading, abusive scenarios. My stomach churned as I scrolled through his social media, filled with images and videos that were not just inappropriate but downright sickening. I was horrified to realize that he had shared his own pictures and videos, often while I was in the same room, blissfully unaware. I confronted him immediately, my heart racing. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he broke down in tears, crying that he felt lost after losing his job. He told me that this depravity gave him a sense of control in a life that felt chaotic. He begged me to stay, saying he needed my help to stop. But the sheer level of betrayal and the disgusting things I had seen made it impossible for me to even look at him. I felt sick to my stomach. In the days that followed, I wrestled with my emotions. I had dedicated myself to him during his hard times, trying to be understanding and supportive. Now, I felt like a fool for believing that everything was fine. The trust we had built over the years felt completely shattered. I had given him my heart, and in return, he had betrayed me in the most horrifying way possible. As I distanced myself, I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disappointment. I confided in a few close friends, who were shocked and supportive. They understood the depth of my pain and betrayal. But as the news spread among our mutual friends, some began to voice their opinions, labeling me as heartless for leaving Sam during what they deemed his darkest moment. They argued that he was mentally unwell and needed support. But how could I support someone who had disrespected me in such a fundamental way? The relationship I had cherished felt like a mirage, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being used. I didn't want to be his crutch or the person who enabled his destructive behavior. I wanted to be with someone who respected me, who valued our relationship, not someone who hid behind a facade while indulging in a double life. Every day became a battle with my thoughts. I questioned whether I was making the right choice by walking away. Sam was someone I had loved deeply. We had shared countless memories together. The thought of leaving him behind was painful. But the idea of staying felt like a betrayal to myself. I deserved better than this. As the weeks passed, I focused on healing. I dove into my work, threw myself into activities that brought me joy, and leaned on my supportive friends. I realized that I was reclaiming my sense of self. Slowly, I began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The more I distanced myself from Sam and the pain he had caused, the clearer my path became. I had made the choice to prioritize my mental health and well-being. I was no longer willing to compromise my happiness for someone who had hurt me so deeply. It was empowering to realize that I could take control of my life and move forward without the weight of betrayal holding me back. In the end, I chose to put myself first. I learned that self-love is essential and that I deserve to be in a relationship where I feel valued and respected. While it hurt to walk away from someone I had cared for, I knew it was the right decision for my future. As I embraced this new chapter in my life, I found hope and strength in the knowledge that I could start over, wiser and more resilient than before. My journey had taught me valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of standing up for myself. And as I looked toward the future, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my own story.
I never thought that a vacation would become the catalyst for one of the most challenging moments in my marriage. Emma, my wife of 5 years, had always been spontaneous, a quality I admired about her. She was the type of person who could turn an ordinary Tuesday into an adventure. However, her spontaneity took a different turn when she decided to surprise me with a dream vacation, one that came at a much higher cost than I could have ever imagined. When Emma first mentioned the idea, I was thrilled. Who wouldn't be excited about a getaway to a tropical paradise? I pictured sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and lazy afternoons spent lounging under the sun. But as the details unfolded, my excitement morphed into anxiety. It turned out that Emma had used our joint savings to book the entire trip without consulting me first. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. Initially, I tried to process it calmly. After all, vacations are meant to be enjoyable. And I didn't want to rain on her parade. Yet, as the realization sunk in that our savings, our safety net, were gone, a sense of dread washed over me. This wasn't the first time Emma had made significant financial decisions without my input. There was that one time she bought a new living room set. And another time she signed us up for a streaming service we barely used. Each time, I felt the walls of our financial stability shake a little more. As we prepared for the trip, the tension simmered beneath the surface. I found myself questioning how we could have let it come to this. The more I thought about it, the more I felt my anxiety mounting. We had discussed our dreams for the future, buying a house, saving for our kids' education, but those dreams now seemed precarious. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the rocky bottom, wondering how we had gotten here. When we finally boarded the plane, I forced myself to put on a brave face. The vacation was beautiful, the beaches were breathtaking, the food was delicious, and I cherished the moments we spent exploring the local culture. But inside, I was wrestling with a growing sense of unease. How could I enjoy this paradise when I felt like I was financially adrift? One evening, as we strolled along the beach at sunset, I finally decided I couldn't hold it in any longer. I approached the topic gently, trying to find the right words. I needed to express how her decision to spend our savings without discussing it made me feel. I thought it was important to address this before it became a larger issue. I wanted to avoid a confrontation, especially in such a beautiful setting, but I felt it was necessary. I told Emma that I loved her spontaneity and her desire to create memories. But I needed her to understand that we had financial responsibilities. I felt like we were not on the same page regarding our finances. And it scared me. When I suggested that we consider separate bank accounts moving forward, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The weight of my words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Emma's face fell. I could see the disappointment morph into anger as she processed my suggestion. She accused me of overreacting, of being ungrateful for the incredible trip she had planned. She saw it as a gift, something to celebrate our love, and my focus on the financial aspect felt like a betrayal to her. To her, this was about creating experiences, not spreadsheets. The conversation quickly escalated. Emma argued that my desire for separate accounts meant I didn't trust her. In my mind, I wasn't trying to undermine her, I was trying to protect our future. I wanted us both to feel secure in our financial choices. I didn't want to feel like our savings were a gamble on whims. I believed that having our own accounts would give us both a sense of autonomy. The vacation continued, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The once joyful moments became tinged with tension. I could see her resentment simmering just below the surface. And I felt like an outsider in my own relationship. We spent the rest of the trip avoiding the topic. But the underlying issues remained unaddressed, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. When we returned home, the reality of our situation hit harder than ever. The house felt colder, and I could sense the distance growing between us. Emma was frustrated with me for ruining the vacation with my worries, while I felt betrayed by her lack of regard for our financial well-being. Our once open communication became strained, filled with silent treatments and passive-aggressive comments. I tried to approach the subject again, hoping we could find common ground. I wanted to express how much I valued our relationship and that my intention wasn't to hurt her but to ensure we had a stable foundation for the future. Yet, every time I brought it up, it felt like opening old wounds. Days turned into weeks, and the tension lingered. Emma continued to be upset with me, and I felt a growing sense of frustration. I began to wonder if I had made a mistake in suggesting separate accounts. Was I overreacting? Was I being too rigid? But as I reflected on our situation, I remained convinced that I needed to set boundaries. As I navigated the emotional fallout, I also began to consider my own priorities. I realized that I had lost sight of my own needs while trying to accommodate Emma's desire for spontaneity. I wanted to enjoy life and create beautiful memories together, but I also wanted to ensure we were making responsible financial choices. I began to think that maybe it was time to reevaluate what I wanted out of our relationship. I sought advice from close friends who had been in long-term relationships. They reminded me that communication was key, and I needed to stand firm in my beliefs. I began to draft a plan for a more balanced approach to our finances. I envisioned a future where we could still enjoy spontaneous adventures without risking our stability. I wanted to find a way to merge our desires for adventure with the need for responsibility. Eventually, I mustered the courage to bring up the topic again. I sat down with Emma and laid out my thoughts. I expressed my love for her and my desire to create a future together. But I also emphasized the importance of financial security. I wanted us both to feel empowered in our choices and to communicate openly about our spending habits. Surprisingly, Emma began to listen. While there were still moments of tension, she slowly started to see my perspective. We discussed setting up a budget that allowed for spontaneity while still keeping an eye on our savings. I could see her warming up to the idea of a more balanced approach to our finances. In the weeks that followed, we made gradual changes. We opened separate accounts but also maintained a joint account for shared expenses. We set a budget that included a fun category, allowing us to indulge in spontaneous activities without guilt. It felt like a compromise, a way to respect both of our desires. As we navigated this new phase in our relationship, I began to feel a renewed sense of connection with Emma. The discussions about money had opened up a new line of communication. We learned to express our concerns and desires more openly, and the trust between us began to rebuild. Ultimately, I realized that while the initial confrontation had been painful, it had led us to a stronger understanding of each other. Our relationship was evolving, and I was grateful for the lessons we had learned along the way. I had fought for our future, and in doing so, I had rediscovered my own voice. Looking back on the journey, I felt a sense of pride. I had stood up for my beliefs and navigated a difficult situation with grace. While we still had challenges to face, I felt confident that together we could tackle anything that came our way. The experience had brought us closer, and I looked forward to building a future filled with love, adventure, and mutual respect.